All right, next. You have to read 999 to 1011 by Monday. We're in the thousands, people. Quadruple digits. We've made it. 999 to 1000. Let's go 1111. It was going to be 1011. Let's just go all ones. Who likes that? It'll be easier. It's only 112 pages. It's not that much. 11, 11, 11. 11 hourly, 11 daily, 11 months. And so 999 to 1011. If you're going to be gone tomorrow, also that last page of the packet is the Espionage Act. You have to do that, and that will be due on Tuesday. And so this is one of the few times it's actually like you can write your answers on the sheet. So there's a little bit of space there, but it's sentences, so it has to be in one. Fingerprint, yes. You drink. That's just a while. It'll be on that. Oh, you want to do it on the, okay, yeah. I ate a big handful of cashews, and I'm like,
yes.
Cashews are great, but they're very dry. All right, so.
I was thinking Monday.
Monday's the
Me too. I was thinking Monday. We were trying to figure out what the date was. And we were all telling them wrong answer.
All right, here we go. So let's get to a couple of notes that we got. Oh, what was the battle that convinced the Russians to stay in the war? Yeah, Tannenberg. Did I say the Russians? I meant to say the Germans. What battle convinced the Germans to stay in the war? Tannenberg. But Russia did stay in afterwards. But Tannenberg convinced the Germans, by all doubt, they should have quit right there. What battle convinced the British and the French to stay in the war? Did we get to that? We didn't quite finish the Marne. Let's do the Marne right now. So the Battle of the Marne. Is that right when we quit? Or we okay.
Yeah.
Right here?
We did, yeah. We got to the left turn.
So we got to the left turn, the famous left turn. The British and the French counterattack. Oh, just what was the big howitzer that reduced the Belgian force? Big Bertha, yes. Reduced the Belgian force at Liège, and so let's get right to this. The Germans made the big left turn right here. The French counterattack. Do we get this at all? The French counterattack convinced the British to join them. Yeah, the British were on their way to the Mediterranean to be evacuated. Their commanding officer. Did I tell you the name of the commanding officer? Yeah, so the German or the British commanding officer basically. Did I say the German? I'm all messed up. Act like I didn't say the last two sentences. The British commanding officer basically said it's not worth fighting in France. Let's go. But the French commander, Joffre, convinced the British commander, and the British commander, I swear to you, I'm not making this up, his name was Sir John French. So the French convinced French to turn and fight. So the British stayed in the fight. Now, there weren't very many British soldiers, but it was really important for France to have Britain part of this so Britain would stay in the war. And they counterattacked in a massive battle on the Marne River, which was ironically when the Schlieffen Plan predicted the Germans would destroy the French army. Now, the French and the British counterattacked, and the German soldiers were absolutely exhausted. But don't forget, the French have been devastated along the frontiers. This battle was very confusing. Back and forth, armies got mixed up together, lines of march intersected to bloody fights. But at the end of the day, the French offensive did not defeat the Germans per se. But this is the important part. The Battle of the Marne showed the Germans that their plan had failed. The Schlieffen Plan had failed. They didn't lose per se the battle on the ground, but their strategic operation, their strategic plan had failed. The Schlieffen plan had failed, and so the Germans pulled back. So this was a victory, therefore, for the British and the French. They didn't win on the battlefield, an overwhelming victory, but the Germans pulled back to this line right here, the high ground, and dug what? They began to dig in. And now the next part of the war will be one of the bloodiest parts of the war, because they're both armies, the Germans are right here, and they both try to outflank each other. They're trying to get around the flank, because there's really not a lot of men up here. This is relatively open. This would be called the race to the sea. As they try to go around each other. In fact, the British went all the way up here to be closer to the supply lines. And they round up and eventually getting to the sea in Belgium. So see this little tiny bit of land? That was all that Belgium held on to, but they held on. So Belgium remained in the fight. Obviously tiny force, but it's really important. So the British, Belgium, and then the French hold here. And both sides would realize, especially that race of sea was so bloody, if you're out in the open, you're dead. And so as soon as they could, they dug in. And soon you have a line of trenches from Switzerland to the North Sea. That line is not exactly where the line would be for the entire time of the war, but it's pretty close. And to this day, many of those trenches are still there. They still find thousands of pounds of unexploded munitions. They still occasionally find bones, all now along that line. I'll tell you a couple stories about that later down the road. And so, watch this. Control yourselves. We're watching something else. That is where you start getting called. You still see them called the top powers, but more and more it's the Allies. So the main allies, obviously, Britain, France, and Russia, and the central powers, because they're right in Central Europe, will be Germany and Austria-Hungary up first. And here's another one of those maps. This one's a German map. And I like how it shows there's Germans dug in, and they show France as a toy soldier. Here, Russia is trying to reach an Austria, and you notice his hands being chopped off. So it's pretty brutal, too. Italy joined the war, so they're stopping the British, even though the British, that lock is the blockade. I like these these skinny men here. Look like kind of horror movie characters. And both sides immediately decided they had no choice but to wage the war. They didn't know what else to do. How do you win the war when they've developed a stalemate on the Western Front? And this has kind of been the British tactic for hundreds of years. While Europe fought, they could attack the periphery. So first off, immediately in 1914, the colonies would be attacked. Britain started attacking German colonies. Germany tried to raid British and French colonies. But Germany's in real trouble. They're going to be bottled up in Germany. So one by one, the colonies here in red are the British or the German colonies would begin to be taken, even though it was called British, in my directions right, British East Africa, today Tanzania. They would hold out the Germans until 1919. Well, after the war ended, they didn't know the war had ended. They were still holding out, even though much of it had been taken. And there are German colonies here. And so they would widen out, the war would be widened to there, there'd be fighting there. Next, other allies would come in. Japan entered the war at the end of the month on the side of the Allies. And Japan immediately attacked the German city of Qinzhou and islands here. Some of these islands would become famous in World War II. For example, Truk or Saipan and Tinian, Kwajalein and Eniwetok, if you're thinking about World War II in the Pacific, all major fighting. And the Australians have got an island here called Guadalcanal. Some of you might have heard of that. It was a Japanese. It was a German colony. And Japan would fight in the war, but mostly they'd stay in the Pacific. And then both sides promised the world to the Ottoman Empire. But the British or the Germans offered more. Especially because the Ottoman Empire had never forgiven Britain for taking Egypt right here and in the Suez Canal. And the Ottomans were promised big hunks of land here, where the stands are, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, those areas here. They promised all the stands, all that stuff here. I guess I could have pointed to this map, but I didn't want to. So they promised all this land in Egypt back, so they joined. They even gave them a battleship. And next, in 1915, Italy. In 1915, a couple different operations made it look like the Allies were going to win. And so Italy jumped in on the side of the Allies. And they were promised this finger of land right here. They were promised this coastline, they were promised land here, promised colonies, all in secret agreements. Italy was promised all this stuff. For those who look ahead in history, will know that Italy did not get most of this. And there'd be a lot of resentment that might lead to a political movement called fascism. It's coming. And Bulgaria joined the Central Powers. They were promised big hunks of Serbia, and even though they had a lot of rivalries with Russia, they joined the war. So now the war is worldwide. Romania would join the Allies in 1916. That was a terrible mistake for them. And of course, the United States the year after that. China would eventually enter the war in 1917, even though there was very little they could do. Portugal did enter the war right at the end. But that is how they tried to widen the war. So 1915, going into that year, it was a shock how much, in the terms of life and riches and wealth, the countries had spent already in 1914. From August to December, just on the Western Front, 1 million men. That's why you can dig trenches when you're dead. As hell as the trenches might be, it's better than being ripped apart. On the Eastern Front, almost that number died, and soon it would be more. It was a bloodbath. Now, how do you convince your population, your people, to continue this fight? Well, you make a lot of promises. Germany decided, okay, the West will dig deep, take the high ground, dig good trenches with good shelters, and make them attack us. Come out of their trenches and we can mow them down. Hold out. And if you're digging trenches, you don't need as many men to hold the trenches. You need a lot more men for the offensive. And knock Russia out. Tannenberg showed that the Russians could be beaten, and they really began to believe one good victory, and Russia will be destroyed and have to sue for peace, and then they could turn on the West. And also knock out Serbia. So Austria did try to take Serbia in August of 1914, and it was a disaster. And Serbia even advanced into Austria. This really shocked the Germans, like, oh God, Austria is much worse than we thought. So now they're going to knock them out. That's why they got Bulgaria to surround them. There'll be a lot of knife in the back of Serbia cartoons at this time. The Allies are in a much more precarious position. They had land taken. And there's something else. Britain had to make an army. Britain had a tiny army, tiny. And they had to train them and equip them. You can't just simply say, hey, let's go fight. And by the way, you guys will be sergeants and you'll be officers. And go get them. And so the British knew, their high command, that they would not have an army ready to fight big battles until 1916. But they didn't tell their people that. They told their people, we're going to win in 1915. It's worth the sacrifice. We can win this. We can win this. But they knew it's going to be another year. They misled their population. And these are the kind of things that fester inside nations. It will blow up in Germany in 1918. And they begin to blockade. Using the Royal Navy, they could blockade the Germans. Now, they didn't blockade here, because that might lead to naval battles too close. They blockaded here. So any ship coming this way, they could stop up here. Neutral ships, including American neutral ships, blockaded here, blockaded there. And so the United States, when they got in the war, would blockade there. But when the war first began, U.S.-owned ships, merchant ships, so owned by U.S. companies, are going to want to try to trade with Germany because it's really lucrative. and they will be stopped by British ships. Do you remember this happened in the 1790s and early 1800s? We had the Quasi War, the Alien and Sedition Acts, impressment, and the War of 1812. All of those things happened once before. Now, when I said all of those things, I hope those names were familiar. Maybe you couldn't have immediately said all the definition, like, oh, I remember that. History echoes a very similar thing about neutral rights. And then Russia needs weapons. They have to build up an industry. They have to find a way to get weapons. And so if you look at this map right here, how do you get weapons to Russia? You can't go here. Turkey will, or the Ottomans will stop them here. It's cold up here. There is the rickety Trans-Siberian Railroad, but it's pretty inconsistent, especially at that time. And so the British are going to think, let's attack on the periphery. If we can hit on the edges of the enemy, this will weaken them and eventually put them in a position where if we get one hard push, they'll collapse. And where's a good place on the periphery? We can take here. We can get supplies this way. Russia doesn't have enough rifles and ammunition. We can get here. And also the British are thinking, and so we can defeat the Germans with Russian blood. Gee, I wonder if that will be a tactic in World War II. History echoes. So, the fronts. Almost immediately, the war will widen to a series of confrontations now between mass armies. And never before were armies this big where they could hold the entire frontier. So that was known as the frontier between nations. That was a term that was used all the time in the 19th century. Our frontiers, our border. So the frontier or front where the two enemies meet. And that's what that term meant, invention of World War I. What new imperfect science would be invented at this time would use that same term of fronts from World War I? Yeah, weather. Cold air, warm air mass meet. Meteorology would take that and call that a front because of World War I. We're having a cold front come through this direction from the west coming to east on Friday night. We're going to get anywhere from 2 to 24 inches of snow. I'm guessing closer to 2. A lot closer to 2. But it could be 24. We're supposed to have a pretty good snow this weekend. We need snow, people. What were the fronts? Well, what are the most important fronts? West and the east. But there are many more. Just listen real quick. I'll go through them really quick. We have, just listen, Italian front. Balkan front. Palestinian front. Mesopotamian front. Caucasus front. Romanian front. It's a big war. And so all these names would just be known for fronts. And on the Russian front, or the Eastern front, this would be called both Eastern front or Russian front. Not really going to mince words on that one. So, the Russian front. The Russians would be here. They're holding this line right here. So they're still holding Warsaw. Now, this is a pretty dangerous salient surrounded by Russia and or Germany and Austria. The Russians decided to attack here. They thought they could knock Austria out. But they overextended. Why is your phone out? I've told you this many times. If I see your phone again, I'm keeping it until the next day. Not again. So, they attacked right here. They would be outflanked and counterattacked by Austrian and Russian forces in the Battle of Tarnow and Gorlice. It's a two-name battle, Tarnow and Gorlice. A massive battle where the Russian army would be destroyed. The entire army group of 300,000 men would be defeated and half of them captured. It was such a devastating defeat right here that the Russians would begin to retreat and end up retreating hundreds of miles to this line right here, opening all this area. So we have today Lithuania, a part of Latvia. We have Belarus today, big hunks of Ukraine, Poland, a massive victory. The only reason the Germans didn't take more is they realized, probably correctly, we don't have enough men to hold it, and Russia, it's got to quit. They've got to sue for peace, and then we can turn on the West. Russia did not quit. They stayed in the fight. The Tsar decided to stay in the fight, even though there's massive food shortages and a famine is coming up that winter. He stayed in the fight. You can see the end coming for Russia. The Italian front opened up, but the problem between Italy and Austria was during the Julian Alps. These are some of the most beautiful mountains in the world right here. And that picture's a little blurry there. But there are peaks, and part of it makes it so beautiful. These rivers would go through these mountain valleys that the mountains might shoot up 4,000 or 5,000 feet from the river, especially along the Islamo River right here. And the point was they're fighting in this very high mountains. They turned into an absolute bloodbath. Just before COVID, they found an old Austrian dugout that had collapsed during the war, and there were 20 bodies in there, all pretty much preserved because they were caught under snow and ice. They just found them. They still find bodies all the time out there, all the time from World War I. And Italy lost hundreds of thousands of men over the next 3 years, and they couldn't push through. This is really going to affect Italy down the road. Another front, another stalemate's the point. And then the Ottomans. The British thought one good push and the Ottoman Empire would fall apart. They had been known for 100 years as the sick man of Europe, and pretty much have been kind of propped up because the great powers didn't want their enemies to take that land. But this is a map, it's a French map, but I like it because it showed the areas really well of the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, not what it used to be, but still massive. Think about all the countries today that make up the old Ottoman Empire. So this is Turkey. What country's right here? That's Iraq. What country's right here? This is Syria. A little finger of land right here. Lebanon. Did you say Lebanon? I didn't hear it, sorry. Right here, this was the Turkish province of Palestine. It would become the British colony. Today it is Israel. And there are Palestinian elements. That's obviously, as you know, well there. This is Jordan. Here, Saudi Arabia. Yemen, which, yes, 3 major ethnic groups would be in there. They create one country. The British would after the war. Gee, I wonder if there's any problems there right now. That we are bombing them. Yesterday, we bombed Yemen. Which I'm sure we'll solve. And the point is, the Ottoman Empire was this multi-ethnic empire. And even though these are ethnically, they're called, today we would say ethnic Turks. Most of the people who live there are Arab. Semites, they're Arabs. And so these are the fronts there. We have the Palestinian front, which would be here. And the big problem there, desert, there's no water. The Ottomans tried to take the Suez Canal. They couldn't get a big enough army because they lacked water. The British would actually have to make a water pipeline. It'd take them a year. The Mesopotamian front, and that's what is Iraq. And the British tried to push up here, would suffer horrible defeats, but eventually, we're going to get to, they're going to create a place called Iraq. And then the Caucasus front. The Caucasus Mountains are up here. And Turkey tried to, the Ottomans, I keep on saying Turkey, but that's not proper. I should say Ottomans. The Ottomans attacked into here, and they were driven back and humiliated. And the Russians invaded into the Ottoman Empire. And this is going to freak the Ottomans out and lead to the 20th century's first genocide. And the Arab Revolt. So, Arabs here, starting here in the Hejaz, were convinced by the British to revolt. And the British promised them, you will have, they actually promised them, a massive pan-Arab state. You will be independent, free from imperial rule of the Ottomans. Guess what the British were doing? Lying through their teeth. They also promised it to a growing movement for a Jewish homeland called Zionism, and they also decided they're going to take it themselves. And guess what the British would do? Take it themselves, and we're leading up to what's going on right now. All out of World War I. And the Arab Revolt would be a fight, a guerrilla war along here. The British would help. You might have heard of Lawrence of Arabia. That was a British officer who came to Lawrence to help them. And Gallipoli. So right here on the routes to Constantinople, the British decided to attack there. So you see this little finger of land right here, little finger? They decided to take that and advance on Constantinople. Today, what city is Constantinople? Istanbul. The Ottomans called it Istanbul, but everybody in the West called it Constantinople. So I'm going to call it Constantinople right now, but Istanbul is more technically correct. Yes, there's a song in the 1920s, Istanbul or Constantinople. And a band I like, They Might Be Giants, redid it, and I really like their version. But they thought they could run it with their fleet. They couldn't make it, and so they landed on this little peninsula. There were some British soldiers, a few French soldiers, but the French had every man in their own country. Also, soldiers from well, actually, it's a number of British colonies on this really big island and a smaller one next to it. Today, we call that really big island Australia. And New Zealand was next to it. And they were sending troops to fight with the British in France. And they just happened to be in Egypt on their way. And so they diverted them and they landed at Gallipoli. They had no idea what they're getting into, and Gallipoli turned into a disaster. So here's the rocky peninsula of Gallipoli. They landed here and got bottled down into more trench warfare. And Constantinople's up here. And it turned into an absolute disaster. Casualties in the thousands. It failed miserably. Remember, got that? Gallipoli was an awful year-long failure. I'm going to go into more. This is one of those I have to kind of censor myself. I know a lot about it, but we don't have time to talk about it. And it's not really for this class, but understand that the British were trying to attack on the periphery. It failed miserably. The Ottoman Empire is going to last for another 3 years after this, surprising everybody. And these are Australians on the attack. So many Australian casualties that they were furious. And this would galvanize the many colonies on that island to say, we need to have our own single dominion country called Australia. And the same with New Zealand. 2 colonies became one New Zealand. Out of Gallipoli came Australia and New Zealand. That created, what do we call that? Devotion to create our own state. Australian nationalism. You'd be shocked how many Australians make the pilgrimage to Gallipoli. One other country had their roots out of here. The new country of Turkey. After the war, Turks in the Ottoman Empire would look at Gallipoli and say, this is where we galvanized ourselves as a nation. We could have fought if not for everything else kind of dragging us down. So Gallipoli was a big deal. They pull out 1916, an absolute disaster. So the whole war, all that mattered was the Western Front. The Western Front. So, the Western Front. These are French soldiers. This is an irrigation ditch, but it's a precursor to what to come. And a bogged down to trench warfare. And attrition means what? Yeah, kill. And who has a big advantage in attrition, the Western or Allies or the Central Powers? Yeah, the Allies are more men. That's why the Germans are going to say, we'll let you beat your head against our wall, and eventually you have to quit. The German plan became more and more, let's figure out a way we can sue for peace, keep Belgium, but then take all of Russia we want. So here's just a basic, I just put this up because I thought this was kind of interesting. Here's generic trenches, right? Look how close it was to the real deal. This is from an observation balloon on British and German trenches just south of the Belgian border in France. Pretty close, isn't it? And so, Germany's going to hold out. That means Britain and France someday is going to have to get out of their trenches and drive them out. So which side would have the more organized trenches? Germany. The Germans, because they're the ones who are going to hold out. The British have got to get out of their trenches and drive the Germans out. Which one of these is the German trenches? Which one's the British? You can see front line, second line, communication trenches. Here, pretty haphazard, isn't it? They actually wanted, the British and the French command didn't want their men to dig really good trenches because they wanted them to be willing to get out of their trenches and fight. Which, of course, you got to be kidding me. You're in a dirt hole, regardless if it's good or bad. It's awful. Yeah.
Is there a reason why?
Yeah. Why they? I know why.
You can't fire down the trench.
Yeah. So if one shell, or the big one was if a shell hits it, the shrapnel won't go way down inside. But there's another reason too. If there's a jagged trench, you can put more rifles on the line. A straight trench, shorter line. Yeah, exactly right. And they would soon realize you put no men in the first trenches, you hide them back here, they'll do a shelling, they'll shell, they'll bombard you. When the bombardment ends, they attack. Then you run the men up to the front. And every spot here, about every 10, 15 yards, what weapon would be there? A machine gun. And they would put barbed wire at night. They'd go out and lay barbed wire in between the trenches. Copying the Petersburg siege, remember the Civil War? What do they call this? Might be. Yeah, that's no man's land. It's just happening right there. And trench warfare was hell. I mean, you can imagine how awful it would be in the trenches. Be wet, miserable. If you're under shelling, you have to kind of hide. You can't get out. You have to kind of have little bomb proofs either dug in or dug way underneath. If you have to go to the bathroom, you do what you got to do. There's bodies everywhere. It's going to be filled with lice. Those are dead British soldiers. The Germans took the trench and then the British took it back. That is an American soldier in a British trench, and he's about ready to go peek over. They would set up periscopes and things like that. Here are German soldiers. This is 1918, and they're about ready to go over the top. And you see, that's barbed wire. Little things hold barbed wire out there. That's a new weapon. Oh no, this one doesn't have a phone call. And this is an Australian soldier in Gallipoli. What's he doing with his hat? Remember that picture I showed you of Petersburg where he put? And what were they doing? Yeah, they're gambling on how many holes would be in the hat. That helmet's called the pith helmet, by the way. Pith helmet. And you can see, last thing for today, the misery of the trenches. So if water's in the trench, think about it, especially that clay soil of Belgium, water doesn't drain fast, and it rains a lot, and the water table, is really high. So these trenches would fill in the water, and your feet are going to be wet all the time. So think about when your skin gets wrinkled. Why does your skin wrinkle if you take a bath? Yeah, more water in the cells. That might be part, but
it's because this is.
And also the capillaries can't send the blood, so so the skin isn't the blood isn't getting to your extremities, but you get out of the bath, fine. What if it's like that for 2 or 3 days? Well, your skin will become vulnerable to all the there's fungus all over. And fungus will get in there and you can't fight it now because blood's not getting to your extremities. The fungus begins to eat away your skin. And what do we call that? And so somebody took his boots off and his toes came with it. And let's be very clear about it. It's not like, haha, my toes came off. It means 2 things. It hurts like hell. And they can't fight. You can't fight if you're like that. And that gives you an idea of the misery. The number one discipline issue in any armed forces today, dry feet. In fact, I was just reading about the Ukrainians and how difficult it is because they're in trenches now. About trench foot, it's a real issue right now, even though they have better boots, still. And what are they picking out of their uniforms? Lysates. Just covered with them. And think about the rats and all the food. And those just aren't regular rats. Those French are just at rat hunting. And that's industrial strength rats. And that's the size of a small cat, a big cat.
Yeah.
Someday I'll tell you about rat finding. All right, let's take out the video. You notice I made the print small. It goes in order. This is a truly great series. It is. It's one of my favorites I have. I really enjoy it. It